a diagnosis, whether that be a negative outcome, whether that be a death or another type of loss. There are moments in which we must look to the future. And in those moments, for the Christian, we have better times that are ahead. Check. If anything else goes wrong tonight, then we're going to stay and worship God. I believe Job said something like that. The dark moments in life often shine the silver lining of heaven the brightest. You ever notice that? Because when we're in the dark, the deep, and the vast pits of life, heaven seems clearer than ever before. I want to take us on a journey tonight, and what I hope is going to be an encouraging lesson, thinking about heaven, thinking about the better times that lay ahead of us, hopefully. And I want to take us on a journey through three different passages and looking at three different aspects of what is required in order for those better times to be ahead of us. What does it mean in this life to have a promise of better times in the future? We're going to turn to Revelation, to the beginning of Revelation, here as we get started. We just finished up our study in the men's Bible study on Revelation. I think this is a fitting time to go back to the beginning where we started. If you remember, in Revelation Chapter 2 and Revelation Chapter 3, we have this letter, these letters written to these 7 churches in Asia. And we're going to spend a minute looking at the sequence of letters here in Revelation Chapter 2 and Revelation Chapter 3. Now we're familiar, if you're familiar with these 7 churches in Asia that John writes to, or the angel here, each angel, we understand perhaps, the pattern here. Because there's only 2 that don't have this pattern. 5 out of the 7 have this in the letter. I know, and this is what you're doing great, but I have this against you. I know you're doing this, and there are several things that you are doing right, but I still have something that you are failing at that you need to be working on. But there is a lesser known, lesser mentioned, but more frequent pattern. And it's found in each one of these letters. At the end of each one of these letters, it ends in a way similar to this. To the one who conquers, I will give. So there are better times ahead. These churches enduring great persecution, great tribulation. There are better times ahead out of this world for those who conquer. 7 out of 7. Isn't that encouraging? If we conquer, if we overcome 7 out of 7, then let's go through these very quickly. Drive home this point for us. In Revelation chapter 2, beginning in our first one here, Revelation chapter 2 and verse 7. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who conquers, I will, here's our first one, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. If you conquer, the promise is that you will be able to eat from the tree of life. Later on in Revelation, in chapter 22, we read that this tree of life, it has fruit, and it's always giving fruit, always producing fruit. 12 different types of fruit. Now, I walk up to an apple tree, and that apple tree is producing, guess what? Apples. And that apple tree, let's say it's a Macintosh. That Macintosh apple tree, guess what it's producing? It is not producing, those of you who are apple snobs, it's not producing Fuji apples, nor pink ladies. It is producing Macintosh apples. This single apple tree is producing the only fruit that it knows how to produce. This tree of life is the same way. It is always producing fruit of life. Always 12 different types of fruit. Isn't that incredible? The power of God. I will grant the one who conquers to eat of the tree of life. Then you look at this next one, the letter to the church at Smyrna, and he ends in verse 11, and he says this, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death. You get that promise? You get to eat of the tree of life, and you will not be hurt by the second death. The first death may come, and it will, unless the Lord comes back first. But the second death, the one where the Lord is able to throw soul and spirit in torment forever, in the eternal fire, the torment that will never end, that you can be spared from if you conquer. Verse 17, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who conquers, I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone with a new name, written on the stone that no one knows except the one who receives it. I will, if you conquer, I will give you a new name that is unique to you. Right now, we've got 7 billion people on the world. We multiply that by all the people that have been before us. We have all these incredible people who are going to be in heaven. What a host! And yet, God gives you a specific name. And on top of that, this white, pure stone, this hidden manna. We know that manna, metaphorically, Jesus says he is the bread of life. He is the manna. He is the one that took care of them in the wilderness, metaphorically speaking. Jesus is, and I am going to give this to you. What a promise. To the church at Pergamum. Next, let's look at the church at Thyatira. We see in verse 26, the one who conquers and who keeps my works until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, as when the earthen pots are broken in pieces, even as I myself have received authority from my Father. And I will give him the morning star. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Isn't that beautiful? I will give him authority over all nations. These people who are being beaten and persecuted and even executed for the sake of the gospel, now the tables have turned. The church at Sardis, we see in chapter 3, moving right along in verse 5, it says, the one who conquers will be clothed thus in white garments, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life. I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. What a promise. I will clothe him in white garments. You remember what Isaiah said. Even our righteous deeds are as filthy and polluted garments when we compare them to the Almighty. Even when we do our very best, we are filthy rags. But to the one who conquers, I will clothe in pure white. And not only that, as if that wasn't enough, I will confess his name before my Father. You understand the irony in that? You see, when we're baptized, we make this confession of who Jesus is before the Father and before everybody else. And we continue that confession every single day. But now the tables have turned in Jesus, because we have always professed the name of Jesus. He now confesses us to the Father. What a powerful, powerful promise to the one who conquers. To the church at Philadelphia, look at what he says here in verse 12. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it. And I will write his name in the name of my God, the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. I've always thought, I don't know about you, but reading through all the details of Solomon building the temple, that's exhausting. And it took 7 years, okay, to build this temple. And just reading all the details, this was carved, and it was this long, and it was this tall, and it was made out of this, and it was woven like intricate. Just show me a picture, right? And that'll be good enough. That's what I always. But I always, as I'm reading that, marvel. And my mind goes absolutely wild. Imagination out of the room. Wondering how gaudy that must be. Ivory, gold, cedar. Everywhere your eye can look, intricate details. And you know what? That's not even the most beautiful temple. I mean, as beautiful as that must have been to behold, the most beautiful temple is the temple of the Lord, His church. What we have been promised here is to be a pillar in the temple of my God, the temple that will never be pillaged by the enemy, the temple that will never be destroyed. We can be a pillar in that temple to the one who conquers. To the one who conquers, he says this in Laodicea, our 7th letter. The one who conquers, in verse 21 of chapter 3, I will grant him to visit with me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. Let that sink in a little bit. To the one who conquers, I will grant him to sit with me on my throne, just as I sat down with my Father. It's pretty heavy. Just as Jesus conquered the enemy, when I conquer this life, I can sit down beside my Father and my brother, the Lord. There are better times ahead, beyond a shadow of a doubt. There are better times ahead for those who conquer. There are better times ahead also, let's go to this next passage, for those who work. For those who work. Look at this with me in Galatians, and we'll turn over there and we'll read this passage. And then we'll spend a little bit of time dwelling on the heartbeat of this passage. Here in Galatians chapter 6, look with me here in verse 9. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. I often have found so much encouragement in reading that simple text. Consider it with me, because it's fairly simple to understand. Let us not grow weary. Consider what it means to grow weary. Compound, exterior, out of. Kakos, bad, inwardly. Inside, its guts are bad. So if you put these two together, ekakos, we have outwardly influence, bad inside. We have something, if we could break it down for us, we have external influences that are influencing us where our inside has become so corroded and corrupted, it is bad. Perhaps you visited the coast like us. And if you're familiar with the coast, there is salt water there. And you know what salt water does to just about everything? It corrodes it. And it corrodes it very, very quickly. Air conditioner, life expectancy, 15 years tops. That's on a good day. These metal structures that you see holding these 6x6 beams, which are holding the house together, very quickly begin to rust within just a matter of years. The bolts that are holding these joists together very quickly, but just in a matter of years, deteriorate. It corrodes. The external forces are causing this to corrupt and corrode from the inside out. That's what's happening to us. Do not grow weary. Do not let the exterior influences of your life bring you down to the point where you become inwardly bitter. You ever known somebody who's done that? They have been in church for so long that exterior voices, influences, friendships have corrupted them, have corroded them, and now they have become bitter towards God. Let us not grow weary in doing good. Doing good. This word good is literally kalos, which means beautiful. Most of the time it's translated as beautiful. Let us not grow weary in doing good, in doing beautiful deeds. Helps Word Studies says it like this, if you'll allow me. It's doing good that inspires others to embrace that which is lovely. Doing good which causes others to embrace that which is lovely. So I'm doing good. I am doing beautiful deeds, hopefully to influence other people. You follow me? Yes, it's important to do good deeds, just simply to do good deeds. But it's also important to do good deeds so that you can influence other people to do good deeds. Do you remember this one verse in particular that comes to my mind? Here in Hebrews chapter 10. Flip over there very quickly with me in Hebrews chapter 10. This is what the Hebrew writer says. In the midst of this let us verses. Verse 24, he says, and let us consider how to stir up one another. Stir up one another to what? To love and good works. Stirring up one another to love and to good works. And this one that we are perhaps more familiar with in Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. We're talking about light. Jesus says everybody understands the light concept. Look at what he says there in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 16. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may, look at it, see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Yes, it is important to do good things, simply to do good things. But in this context, the work that we are talking about is the work that motivates other people to work. Let them see your good deeds. And by seeing you do good, it motivates them to embrace the same good and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Yes, it's good and it's important to do good just simply because that's the right thing to do. But it's also important to stir up one another to love and to good works. Now, I'm not saying go around town and show everybody, look at everything that I've done. But every once in a while, it is encouraging to see someone else do something good. And that ought to motivate us to do these beautiful things. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap. We will reap. Did you catch that two-letter word? We. Paul is absolutely certain about him receiving this harvest. And we can say the same thing, right? I mean, yeah, of course Paul's going to be in heaven. Of course, absolutely. If anybody's going to make it there, Paul's going to be there. But it's first person plural. We, all of us, all of these Christians who come after Paul, that's us. We will reap. It tells that, yes, Paul is certain, but the certainty of the harvest is for everybody. It's not just for Paul. It's not just for the elite. It's not just for those that we set up on a pedestal and say, man, that person is great and what a wonderful Christian. It is for all those who do not grow weary in doing good. Because there is the harvest principle. And the harvest principle is, if you sow, you're going to reap. And you will reap what you sow. It's easy to understand. You plant some corn, guess what's going to come out of the ground? Biscuits. Corn, of course. There's nothing but corn going to come from a corn plant. When you do good, there is nothing that's going to come from doing good except reaping. What are we reaping? Eternal glory. There is better times ahead for those who work. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we don't give up. Turn your attention to one more idea, one more principle found in 1 John chapter 5. And in 1 John chapter 5, we're going to look at the first 5 verses there. 1 John chapter 5. because there are better times ahead for those who believe. Those who believe. Now follow me, because you're going to find in the denominational world that there will be a lot of people that will tell you that all you have to do is believe. Put your hand on the television and pray this prayer with me. Now you're saved. Look at what believing is here, as John writes. Let's dive into this text. Let's read verses 1 through 5 for our purposes. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. By this we know we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. And his commandments are not burdensome. For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. Who is it that overcomes the world? Except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. There's a lot in this short 5 verses. There's a lot there to unpack. And we're going to unpack it this way. We're going to build a sandwich, okay? And this is going to help us understand this passage when we build this sandwich. Because we got these pieces of bread at the top. Because it begins in verse 1 and it ends in verse 5 in a very similar manner. Read those again with me while we skip 2, 3, and 4. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. Who is it that overcomes the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? Our bread is that we believe. Because this serves as what holds everything together. You can start building that sandwich however you want to, but if you don't start with a piece of bread, you're going to have some trouble. Do you believe? Do you believe that, first of all, that Jesus is the Christ? Do you believe, second of all, there in verse 5, do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? There's our bread. At the very beginning and at the very end, Jesus is the Christ and Jesus is the Son of God. Do you believe? There's better times ahead if you do. Do you believe that Jesus is the Christ? Do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? There's our bread. That's our foundation. Let's get into the meat a little bit. Because if you believe, right, if you believe that Jesus is the Christ, and if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, who he actually claimed to be, then we see in the second half of verse 1 and into verse 2 that you're going to love the children of God. You see that? Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments. If you believe that Jesus is the Christ, and if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, then by all means you will love the church. You will love the people who are the children of God. You will never, ever say, I can't stand that person who sits across the auditorium from me. If you believe that Jesus is the Christ, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, you will love the children of God. And if you love the children of God, we continue in verse 2, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, if you believe that Jesus is the Christ, and you love the children of God, continue with me. You will love and obey God. You see that? Verse 2, by this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and obey his commandments. And let's take it a step further. Why don't we? For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments. And let's take it one step further. Elevate it just a little bit. And His commandments are not burdensome. If you love God, if you believe that Jesus is the Christ, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and you love your brother and sister over there and everywhere, if you love all of them and you love God, you're going to obey God. And you will never, ever say, I want to get to heaven so bad, but I just wish that God wasn't so hard on. Or that we could just practice this sin. Or that I could participate in this thing of the world. Because the commandments of God, they're not a burden. They're a joy and a pleasure and honor. If you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, if you believe that Jesus is the Christ, you love the children of God, you love God, and you obey His commandments, then, look with me at the end of verse 3, you will keep His commandments. This is sort of the mayonnaise, if you will. If you don't like mayonnaise, okay. This will be mustard. This is the flavor. This is what holds it all together. When your hamburger starts sliding off, the mayonnaise is going to catch it. Keep the commandments of God. If you believe that Jesus is the Christ, right? And you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and you love your brother and sister, and you love God, and you obey God, you will keep His commandments. You're going to keep His commandments. No two ways about it. It's all wrapped together. It is all tied together. And it all comes back to belief. Do you believe? Do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Do you believe that Jesus is the Christ? Do you believe that Jesus is who He claimed to be? Do you love God? Do you love your brother? Do you obey? Because that's the key to belief. There are better times ahead for those who believe. You follow me, right? Because we end in verse 5. Who is it that overcomes the world except the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God? So that's what we want, right? We want to overcome the world. But it's all tied together. Because if you overcome the world, then you're going to believe that Jesus is who He claimed to be. And if you believe, you're going to be born again, right? And if you are born again, you're going to love God. And if you love God, you're going to obey God. And if you obey God, you're going to keep His commandments. And if you keep His commandments, here we arrive at the end. You're going to overcome the world. There are better times ahead for the one who believes. Because the one who believes will overcome the world. But unfortunately, in this world, the sad reality is that there are not better times ahead for everyone. If you find yourself in that category, or perhaps you just need a little encouragement tonight, that's what the church is for. If you need encouragement to look for better times ahead, come as we stand, as we sing.
Comes in glory by and by, what a song of praise will be outpoured.